Dreamworks dropped this janky Mario Kart clone featuring a bunch of its most iconic characters. And with Smash-like platform fighters popping up more, you gotta wonder, what if Dreamworks had a Smash Brothers? Well, let's talk about it by covering the game's design with this Dreamworks spin. Starting out with the most hyped part of any fighting game, the roster. First up, we have shrek! Being the face of Dreamworks like Mario is to Nintendo, Shrek is a no-brainer. The big boy's gonna be a heavyweight brawler. All you Shrek mains, don't be afraid to jump into fights with him since he can eat a lot of hits. I can see his kit having a ground pound and lots of knockback heavy moves. With his slower speed though, I can see Shrek running into problems with the more agile fighters we'll cover soon. For specials, I can see him using his earwax or some onions. And Shrek's final smash would be the Ugly Ogre, where he grows even larger in size and becomes even more menacing as his roars destroy his opponents. You can easily make a Smash Brothers roster with just the Shrek franchise, but I'd like to make room for these other movies. So my other top picks for representing Shrek are Donkey and the Fairy Godmother. Let's keep our all-star selections for the top row of this roster, which means this next fighter should come to no surprise. He's a household name like Shrek, but besides being big men, these two have their fair share of differences. Poe's bringing his kung fu skills to the battle. It'd be hilarious to see his plump self pulling off a Kazuya 10-hit combo. His chi-based attacks also play a huge role for his specials, and will also sprinkle in Poe's love of food for other attacks like bow projectiles. In his final smash, Poe grabs the closest opponent as he says this signature line, "Skadoosh." A massive golden shockwave erupts, sending the victim and nearby players off screen. There are so many characters from this franchise that I can see being part of the main roster, though I think it makes more sense for there to be a Tekken roster with all these fighters. But anyway, the entire Furious 5 should be playable in this game. To contrast these two heavies, let's bring in a lighter character. Poppy! This queen, is pretty much the opposite of our first two fighters. She'll be small, light, and fast. Similar to the princesses of Smash, she'll have pink, sparkly, femme-based combat. So I can see her hair and scrapbooking skills being used for tilt attacks. Poppy's special moves will be based on her musical abilities. For Poppy's final smash, we're bringing in the Trolls World Tour as a cinematic transports fighters to a split stage. Queen Poppy and her troll friends release light pop energy, while Queen Barb and the Rock Trolls unleash dark rock tunes. The battle of the bands ends in an explosion that only few can survive. There's plenty of costumes she wears throughout the franchise, so for your aesthetic players, you'll be satisfied. Not so aesthetic though is this next fighter. This duo easily deserves a spot in this top row. I mean, the first entry was a massive hit and is one of DreamWorks' best reviewed movies. Not to mention the live-action remake releasing soon, which has every dragon looking somewhat realistic besides this mushball. While Hiccup and Toothless being separate fighters would give more room to let their personality shine, it feels more appropriate keeping them together. So I'm thinking we draw inspiration from Joker bringing out when his rebellion gauge is fully charged. By himself, Hiccup would be a low-tier character if he had just a regular sword. Thankfully, we're bringing in the Inferno. We can use a mix of this flaming sword and his Zipple-back gas for a bit more strategic-based attacks. As Hiccup calls in Toothless, expect to use his signature Plasma Blast and be prepared for an aerial fight. In Hiccup's final smash, let's be honest, we want to see Toothless in alpha form. When the final smash is activated, any grounded player within range of Hiccup is launched upward as a cinematic shows Toothless's body glowing. Then he fires a poop ton of Plasma Blast, striking enemies with the finale being a blinding plasma explosion. Astrid would make a fun playable character with the rest of the Dragon Riders joining as assist trophies. Up next, we're yoinking another beast from a mid-2000s classic. The King of New York has entered the chat as a medium-heavy fighter. He'll use his claws for his regular moves, and for his specials, the first thing that comes to mind is a stunning roar. And we can include his love for steaks as a counter move. I also remember him being acrobatic in the movies, especially Madagascar 3, so Alex will have a pretty strong aerial game. His final smash is a jungle ambush, which has Alex leaping into the air, summoning a pack of his animal friends as they stampede through opponents. The penguins aren't going to be part of this one because, well, they're mentioned in the next row. Anyway, the rest of the main squad, Marty, Gloria, and Melman, would also make fun playable characters.
Oh, sugar honey iced tea.
Now let's get to closing out this row with one of the deadliest characters in the roster.
Damn, look who's here.
Boss Baby!
A baby in a fighting game? Well, we're not talking about any ordinary baby. I mean, look at how unhinged he is.
Sushi I'd kill for a spicy tuna roll right about now. Get yourself a little something.
Put your parental instincts aside for a second, you know Boss Baby would be a fun fighter. He's a no-frills baby with a suit and a briefcase that I can see the boss using mixed in with tantrum-like punches and kicks. For specials, let's bring in some baby objects like a pacifier as a projectile. In Boss Baby's final smash, we're triggering the Baby Vomit Fountain. A yucky green blast spews from Boss Baby, covering opponents as they're damaged and knocked back. Think Mario's Flood times 1,000. For any of you toxic players, you'll need to take advantage of Boss Baby's wild taunts. Let's have Tim Templeton and Jimbo join the fight as playable characters, along with Stacy and the Baby Corp babies as assist trophies. We've made it through our first 6 fighters who all happen to be the leading stars of Dreamworks. And while I could do that for the rest of the roster, that'd be too predictable. Let's switch things up with these slightly less popular picks.
Hey, Puss in Boots! Isn't we supposed to be having a fiesta?
You can argue that Puss in Boots belongs in the top row, but since I'm choosing one character per franchise for now, Shrek clears. That being said, Puss would be an S-tier fighter in the game. He's got the agility and the strength going for him. Meta Knight comes to mind, but Puss would definitely be stronger and more elegant. I can see Puss bringing in his main weapon, the rapier, for battle, using it for some deadly slashes. I can also see him jumping between opponents at blazing speed thanks to his cat-like reflexes. Bringing in his iconic pouty face as a special, this would make opponents in range defenseless before he catches them off guard as a punishment. Puss's final smash has him bringing out his other lives to assist him as they rush onto stage with their own flare of attacks. We'll also bring in his worst nightmare, Death, as a DLC. If you're not a sword fighter but you crave fast speed, check out this next fighter. This one may be controversial because someone's bound to comment that these two clowns are a better fit, but I'm going with my gut and bringing in
Shell!
Definitely giving me Chic vibes with the way she'll play. Shell will rely on her speed with quick strikes as she stays on her toes. And let's be honest, Hacha got nothing on these hips. Like Chic, it'll take a hot minute before she gets in a kill though. For Shell's specials, she'll bring in the El Dorado Spice, throwing some golden coins. This final smash is gonna be a little bit different. She'll unleash her golden temptress. All other players are basically useless as she performs the seduction. And when they're at their weakest, she strikes. Shell knows what she's doing. Let's go. And just like Mai from Street Fighter, I can see people thirsting over Chell the same way. We mentioned a lion earlier, so let's go down this same animal vein with the stallion.
Spirit!
Being one of the fastest fighters, part of Spirit's kit has him performing quick dashes and leaping lunges. I can also see him using a charged up side special for heavy knockback potential. To emphasize that Spirit's a super mobile character, he'll get a boost of invincibility if he's able to perform a full run. We'll balance this out with basically non-existent verticality. In his American Frontier final smash, the fight cuts to an open Cimarron plain where opponents are tied up in chains while Spirit darts through them at full speed in a straight line. His love interest, Rain, can join the roster as an Echo Fighter. Don't like fighting as a land mammal? Then we'll head to the ocean for this next fighter.
Oscar!
He's a slippery guy with these fish-like dodging moves, so Oscar would be a prime pick as a whiff punish character. Not a good one for you players who want brute strength though. I can see Oscar moving like both a human on his fins, but with some moves he'll swerve around and glide like a fish. He's a super flashy guy, so let's bring in his dance moves to screw with opponents as well. In Oscar's Whale Wash final smash, opponents are pinned down in a sequence that cleans the Battle of Evil. A bunch of the Whale Wash employees will come in to help, rubbing in soap in this damaging dance number. Oscar shows off his bling in his victory screen as he strikes a pose. We have other Shark Tale reps joining Oscar later. Let's jump back to Madagascar though for this next group.
Penguins of Madagascar!
We're gonna include all 4 members as we switch between them using a radial menu to activate one of the penguins at a time. Starting with Skipper, the leader, playing as an all-around fighter. Next, Kowalski, the brainiac, is always inventing, so let's bring in his inventions as weapons. There's Rico, the demolition master. His explosives are so powerful that they affect him too. These contraptions have a cooldown to prevent people from spamming, introducing more strategic combat. And finally, Private, being the charming baby he is, Private uses his skills to distract enemies. He'll play as the most offensive character out of the bunch. The squad comes together for their final operation. In a fury of non-stop attacks from the crew, it's easy to say that no one's surviving this. After pulling off this final smash, you can use a personal favorite taunt. Switching between 4 characters is a bit confusing, so let's dumb it down a bit with this duo who has a similar moveset.
Wallace and Gromit! Gromit!
Using Duck Hunt synergy as a template, let's have Wallace be the main fighter and Gromit joining for assist. They also have their fair share of inventions, but it's a bit unconventional compared to the penguins for Wallace's basic moves. Gromit is there for moral support, but he can also bring in different weapons like the Auto Chef as an explosive or the Moon Rocket, launching them upwards for recovery. The pair's final smash has Wallace transforming into the Were-Rabbit as he goes on a mad rampage. Throwing it back to a close shave, do you remember this lovable sheep being introduced? Sean went on to have his own TV series and movies, so he definitely deserves to be a playable character. It's cool having all these good guys as part of the main roster, but there's only so much fun being good all the time. We gotta sprinkle in some spice with these evil fighters. I've made y'all wait long enough.
Megamind!
This self-proclaimed villain turned hero is gonna be another popular fighter. I can see Megamind moving around like Mewtwo with his floatiness and being a mid-range zoner due to his multifunction blaster. And yes, he'll actually use the dehydration gun. He's also gonna have some sneaky specials. Megamind's final smash has him activating his Brainbot army, which stuns all fighters while taking control of his opponents for some self-sabotage action. Metro Man would be another awesome fighter, but what about the hero turned villain? We'll revisit him later on. We're going back to Kung Fu Panda to cover our next villain fighter.
Tai Lung!
Since he was basically the Anakin Skywalker of the movie, this prodigy turned villain would be an S-tier fighter, being a perfect balance of power and speed. For you aggressive players, he's definitely your guy. Tai Lung will have lots of combo options for torturing your opponents. He's the type of character to have some lab monster find an exploit that gives him an unblockable combo on day one. Maybe it's just the color scheme, but I'm reminded of Wolf, so I can see his punches having this purple energy effect, plus some claw slashes. Tai Lung's mastery of the 1,000 Scrolls comes to play in his final smash. In a cinematic using the Jade Palace as a backdrop, he'll take turns using his acquired techniques, ripping his way through opponents in slow motion. For you die-hard Kung Fu Panda fans, I think a Po versus Tai Lung battle would go crazy. Like, imagine a Dreamworks smash major grand final between the two. Tell me that wouldn't be hype. There's still another Kung Fu rep if neither of these guys fit your playstyle. Now let's rewind all the way back to the beginning.
General Mandible!
Bringing in Dreamworks' first animated movie, Ants. Let's include this messed up dude who's gonna do some heavy damage. I mean, he tried taking down the entire worker class. General Mandible is definitely a tanky build. He'll use his Bident for some thrusts and pincing. As a signature special, the General calls in ant minions as distractions and creating space. For General Mandible's final smash, he brings in an army of ants which swarms the stage in waves. As they rush in, explosives go off, juggling opponents and doing some crazy damage. There was another movie that released a few years after Ants, putting Dreamworks on the map. Their representative coming soon. Well, let's fast forward again to current times to touch on this alien leader.
Captain Shrek!
Let's bring in this wimpy alien who's a disgrace to his colony. And I'm gonna be honest, I've never heard of Home before making this video, so if it's worth watching, let me know. The Boov leader is gonna use his alien tech like his scepter as his primary weapon. And for specials, let's give him some evasive maneuvers. Then there's Captain Smek's final smash, Boov Invasion. The captain flies over the battlefield in a spaceship sending out destructive beams. And as other playable characters, we gotta bring in Owen Tip along with the Gore Commander as an assist trophy. The finesse Captain Smek lacks is made up for by this next fighter.
Mr. Wolf!
Unlike the Smash character who shares the same name, he'll be faster like Fox. Mr. Wolf is also going to be lighter, so this is for players who want a speedy rushdown character, but you'll need to be careful not to get launched. He mainly uses quick jabs and will give him a con man counter to capitalize off spamming opponents. We're assembling the crew for the big heist final smash. In a cinematic, the squad sets up on the stage with flames, explosives, and lasers, which ends with Mr. Wolf setting off a detonator. He's got the cleanest wardrobe in the game, so let's throw in this fun look. Next up, we've got one of the scariest Dreamworks villains to close out this row. This warlord from How to Train Your Dragon 2 is a ruthless fighter. Like our other popular evil Ganon, he might not be as fast, but the attacks are pure pain. Drago's main weapon is gonna be his bullhook for sweeping opponents and hooking onto them. Similar to the Hiccup Toothless dynamic, Drago calls on Bewilder Beast when his rebellion's gauge fills. Bewilder Beast attacks with Ice Breath and creates deadly storms. As Drago's final smash, Bewilder Beast asserts its Alpha Dragon dominance as it roars, calling on other dragons to invade the battle with different elemental attacks. In case you wanted to remove the human element and play just a dragon, we'll bring in Red Death, the gigantic one from the first movie. This brings us to our last row. We have these wild cards who are still a huge part of Dreamworks, but they're a little under the radar. I thought Captain Underpants only existed as a comic, but supposedly it's a good movie.
Captain Underpants!
I can see him being a very reckless fighter with these random but hilarious superhero moves. Captain Underpants would be one of those fighters where you string together a combo and never be able to reproduce it because it was just that wacky. Let's give him fart specials like Wario, but with even more power to mix things up, and using his underpants, of course, as a weapon is mandatory. As a final smash, he'll pull out this item that was used against him, the Hypno Ring. It'll take center stage as it hypnotizes his enemies. He'll then fly up to each fighter, giving them a beatdown. For skins, let's change his cape color, and as a bonus, switch to his comic book form. Let's bring in George and Harold as a tag team playable character. Enough of this smooth brain gameplay. Let's switch it up to this genius.
My name is Mr. Peabody!
Wow, Dreamworks has a lot of tech-savvy inventors. Mr. Peabody isn't gonna be beginner-friendly thanks to his kit. Between his gadgets alone, Mr. Peabody has so many options to choose from, which means that he'll be a harder character to learn, but once you do, it's gonna be super annoying closing the gap on him. The Wayback Machine Final Smash freezes opponents in time, then Mr. Peabody rails them with the Wayback Machine. And once time is resumed, opponents go bye-bye. There's a large pool of playable characters to choose from in this franchise. You got Sherman, Penny, and since he's the main antagonist of the movie, let's bring in King Tut as an assist trophy. This roster has their fair share of big characters, but this next fighter trumps them all.
Ginormica!
Even though in the movie she was 49 feet and 11 inches tall, that doesn't scale well to this fighting game, but she's still gonna be significantly larger than everyone else. But also that wouldn't really be fair, so to balance this, let's have Susan switch between human and Ginormica, as we'll see in her moves. In human form, Susan's not completely useless. I can see her as a balanced brawler. She'll have a rage mechanic that requires a special button press to activate her transformation, because it only lasts a short period of time. Once she completes the growth, her attack range and damage output skyrockets with ground-shaking stomps. She can even pick up opponents to repeatedly slam them into the ground. In her final smash, Ginormica grows even more and dominates the stage. Just run far away from her at this point. It's not even a battle worth fighting. Bob, the Missing Link, and Galaxar would make for super fun and unique fighters as well, which makes me think a Monster vs. Aliens roster would probably be the most creative out of all the Dreamworks franchises. Anyway, up next, we're gonna be fighting Dirty with this iconic character.
Ready!
He's a scrappy and lean fighter with a sewer-based kit. Roddy's playstyle will have others calling you a rat. Get it? Touching on that sewer-based kit, he'll whip out a bunch of these themed objects for weapons, while also equip Roddy with a jammy dodger as a recovery tool, one of the best in the game. His final smash is the Great Flush, where a giant whirlpool of sewer water catches everyone in a spiral in a quick animation before they're swept away. I can see Roddy's co-pilot Rita being a fun echo fighter, and as an assist trophy, we'll bring in this duo Whitey and Spike. Now that we're done playing Dirty, it's time to move on to the holiest fighter. This is another walk with me character, but I promise you he's built different.
Moses!
He'll use his staff as his weapon, but he's not a swordsman. Moses is gonna play like a mystic. We'll give him basic spells for light damage, and like Hero with his list of spells, we're gonna use Moses' biblical specials for some spicier gameplay, like summoning a plague of locusts or bringing down a supernatural storm. These have a cooldown though, so timing is everything. The parting of the Red Sea final smash has him split the arena as waves rush through, sweeping up your opponents. Moses makes way for himself as he leads the Israelites through, while the rest of your enemies are carried off the stage in a wrath. A Ramesses Moses fight would be another instant classic, so he definitely needs to be part of this game too. We're down to the last fighter, and it just so happens to be a duo. This pair, not gonna lie, is the one I'm most hyped for.
Ginger and Rocky!
Their main kit has them working together like the Ice Climbers with spin attacks and some charged flapping moves. Not the best reach though, but you should be able to close gaps well with their speed. Ginger and Rocky's eggs, which in this economy shouldn't be wasted, are gonna be the perfect projectiles. For their final smash, it's pie time. In a cinematic, opponents are placed on a conveyor belt where they have to put their platforming skills to the test, avoiding the pie machine's traps. Anyone left on the belt by the time they reach the oven? And that's a wrap for our main roster. Don't worry if your favorite characters haven't been mentioned, there's still the boss mode at the end of the video, but first we'll have to cover some honorable mention fighters. Because of her popularity, I feel like devs would buff her like crazy, so Fiona would be a broken DLC character. As a human, her combat involves her martial arts skills, but you'll also be able to switch to her ogre form. And I can see her being an annoying matchup for Shrek because of her speed, but even as a human, she could still unleash her ogre strength. I couldn't fit this franchise in the main roster, so I hope to to redeem myself with a spot as DLC. To represent the Croods, let's bring in Grug. Having a very primitive moveset, he relies on his raw strength to survive. We can also have him use some makeshift rock weapons for specials. This DLC fighter moves swiftly with high speed and quick strikes. At this point, it seems like the Kung Fu Panda fighters are all upper tier, but that's what you get when you have a Kung Fu cast joining a fighting game. Out of all the reps though, Tigress will be the most technical fighter. Borrowing Marth's sword where he deals more damage at the tip, Tigress's claws could have a sweet spot at the end of her strikes. So you really gotta be on point with spacing and accuracy. A battle between Tigress and Fiona would be exciting to watch because of their overlapping fighting styles. Moving on to assist trophies, let's bring in the Bee Movie, as Barry B. Benson flies in as a huge distraction. He'll be loudly buzzing around with his quick flying moves as he pokes at fighters. He'll also leave a honey trail which creates a sticky trap if players stay in it long enough. The Shark Tail mobster brothers Lenny and Frankie would make high pressure assists. They'll think everyone in their path is food as they horizontally charge back and forth across the stage. Anyone in their way is chomped and launched. It hurt excluding him from the main roster, so that's why we gotta bring in King Julian's flashy dance moves, as he plays as a comic relief assist. He's not trying to hurt you, but his wild spins and kicks will definitely send opponents flying. Of course, I Like to Move It has to make an appearance. Either playing for the duration of his assist, or to avoid copyright, we'll make it a quick soundbite when he pops in. We've got a solid lineup of fighters, but now the question is, where are these battles gonna take place? Welcome to Shrek's original habitat, complete with his iconic shed. The swamp is now overrun by fairy tale creatures, creating a hazard for players. Plus, there's a day-night option. At night, the battlefield is lit by countless candles, giving the stage a more serious vibe. Next, it's the Dragon's Nest, a suspended stage set inside a cavern with a dramatic volcanic backdrop. Molten lava runs down the walls with rock platforms that'll crumble if you stand on them for too long. Heading to the city is the Central Park Zoo. Using iconic New York City landmarks as a backdrop, we'll have animal exhibits and a lively zoo atmosphere. A beautiful stage is the sunny golden city of El Dorado. Filled with towering temples and ancient stone ruins, it'll feature a platform soaring above the city like the Wii Sports Resort, giving players an aerial view. As the platform floats through the jungle, vines occasionally tangle up players for even more chaos. This buzzing stage is set inside the vibrant and intricately detailed hive. Players will navigate through honeycomb-shaped platforms with the constant hum of bees filling the air. Watch out for swarms of bees that can briefly disrupt the stage. Set in the breathtaking Valley of Peace with stunning mountains similar to the aesthetic of Fire Emblem stages, we're at the Jade Palace. The stage will be a narrow platform with a bunch of pillars built on it. This is sure to become a fan favorite competitive map. We've got our rosters and stages, so now let's add a boss mode for revealing our final picks. We've arrived at Duloc, where Lord Farquaad has requested a grand tournament. Battle waves of knights, with each one being more skilled than the last. Up next, we're facing Megamind's rival, Titan. We're going to the city where he's making a mess, and it's your job to stop him. Titan will be fairly strong, but even more annoying are his energy blasts that you'll need to dodge. Make sure you don't let him have his way with destruction, or else there won't be a city left to save. This next fight is more for the memes. She's not a harmless old lady in the film, so you'll have to defend yourself against Nana. She'll hurl insults the entire time, so it's important you stay focused. Bringing in another classic, I didn't get to share Over the Hedge in any of my fighters yet, but they deserve their flowers. So it's time to duel the Verminator. Taking place in a suburban backyard, you'll be dealing with a bunch of traps, so be ready for anything. But you won't be alone though, because RJ the raccoon is ready to support, so this will be a 2v1 fight. The Verminator will just think of you as another pest, which means avoiding his net gun, tranquilizer darts, and other wacky tools. We're almost at the end, which means things are gonna get dark with pitch black. In a pitch black battlefield, there'll be spotlights that briefly appear, guiding you towards him. He'll summon nightmarish creatures and creepy shadow attacks in waves, bringing fear to all players. Not gonna lie, this guy's gonna feel like Sephiroth in Kingdom Hearts with how challenging he is. And now it's time for our final battle. It's gonna be a duel against the Dreamworks boy. It's a fight set high in the clouds in a beautifully lit moonshine stage. Definitely the final destination of this game, with some intense violins to set the tone. Then appears the Dreamworks boy, who I can see moving like this limbo kid, super flowy, but also the atmosphere is gonna have this dark, moody vibe to it. Dreamworks boy fights with his fishing rod, but he also has the ability to call on any Dreamworks character spanning the history of the company to help him. This is the type of fight that'll have your stomach in a wrench the entire time, which makes victory that much sweeter. And that's a wrap for a Dreamworks Smash Brothers fighting game. What else would you like to see if this concept came to life? And if you enjoyed this video, here's another one YouTube thinks you'll like.
My time has come.